afternoon. My name is Marg Misek-Evans. I'm the CAO for the town of Tecumseh, and I'm pleased to be here to moderate this session for you. Our next session is titled Managing Cyber Attacks, a Step-by-Step Incident Response Process, presented by Daniel Michaluk, National Co-Leader Privacy and Cybersecurity at BLG. Dan is one of Canada's foremost legal experts on this topic, and we're fortunate he has agreed to share some of his expertise with us today. He'll walk us through the practical steps organizations should take before, during, and after a cyber incident, with a focus on building an effective response process when it matters most. So over to you, Dan, please.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the invite. I'm really happy to be here today. What a day out there, too. I hope you get some time to enjoy it out there. It was just amazing to get 10 minutes to decompress. As said, I'm Dan Michaluk. I lead let me qualify myself for this talk, too. I lead a team of national cyber incident responders, cyber security incident responders at BLG. And the particular focus of our team is on the public and municipal sectors. We think it's harder because of the unique way in which you're governed and all of the joys of being a municipality that you know very well. I like the challenge, and I like being able to support your mandate, frankly. It's a worthy mandate. What I plan to do today is spend about an hour with you, giving you a very realistic view of ransomware response. Can I do a survey? How many of you have been through a ransomware response incident? All right, lucky. I won't ask who's been through it twice. It does happen to some of our very best clients. That's just the nature of where we are today. What I'll do is give you a presentation that's really drawn from a tabletop exercise that we do, and will be fully scenario-based, which will make it very realistic. The scenario is quite real, and hopefully practical for you. So the plan is to kind of present a scenario. I have 7 lined up if we have time for it. And then I'll annotate the scenario a little bit, and then we'll flip from the scenario slide to an issue slide. And each issue slide will set out 3 issues, and I can annotate the 3 issues a little bit. I'll start us going. I'll probably ask you questions about how you plan on handling those 3 issues, and encourage you to kind of share. I think we'll all learn by that. And then have questions as we go. I think we've got lots of time for it. Only 7 scenarios in an hour. I anticipate lots of questions, but I do want to encourage them as we go. I think that'll give us a nice, lively, interesting session on this Thursday afternoon. So that's the plan. The call to action, which I'll plant in your mind at the start and I'll return to at the end, is think about running this type of exercise with your leadership teams and IT together. Lots of you have done tabletop exercises, I'm sure. Some of them may be quite like this. If so, I think that's good. I think this style of tabletop exercise is particularly effective if done with leadership and IT together, because these are all about alignment, partially, about identifying gaps, and about surfacing understanding about what really happens in a ransomware attack. And for that, this is a self-centered pitch. Our suggestion is to have a breach coach, BLG or anybody, run your tabletop and give you a very realistic public sector and municipal scenario like you'll see. That's my lead in. Are we ready? Let's go for it. Scenario 1. I was going to say, we're supposed to have music here that's really threatening and scary. Picture the music in your head. Close your eyes. I'll let you read it for a sec. Okay, and I'll annotate and take care of any terminology here. And if you have questions about the scenario, let me know. This is kind of how it happens. Really strangely, it used to always happen on Friday for whatever reason. It's kind of changed, and I have no clue why. I don't even have a theory for you on that. But it can happen exactly like this, where things just are realized to be down in the morning. IT sometimes comes in early and kind of does some diagnosis and goes, oh, we've got a problem. And they'll find a literal text file sitting in the root directory of computers that are encrypted and unusable. And the text file is the ransom note, which is meant to be found. This one claims 400 gigabytes of data theft. I have a strange appreciation for the size of data now. 400 gigabytes tends to map onto about like 500,000 files of the kind that would be stored on a file share. Okay, so and that number is right around the middle of what we tend to see. We see as low as like 50 gigabytes being pulled out by ransomware threat actors, and as high as a terabyte. Beyond a terabyte, which does happen once in a while, it's hard, like literally, for them to pull out that much data without someone noticing. So this is very typical. It's a typical number. On premise, I think you probably all know, but you've got data centers within the municipality that run certain applications. Some of you are partly on premise and partly in the cloud right now. Ransomware is an on-premise system problem. They're attacking your data center and the applications that you run on the computers that are in-house. IT has moved to full network containment. This is the self-inflicted wound that comes along with a major cyber attack. You should understand that what happens in order to protect the network is someone in IT pulls the plug out of the internet, basically. Figuratively, they change firewall settings, literally, to protect the network from everything else. And that's what takes everything down. And then you go from that posture to coming back. IT obviously had a good playbook. They have a holding message that doesn't reveal anything, and I think you're entitled to do that right off the start, that says we are having technical difficulties. My advice to clients who we talk with at this very stage is you are entitled and you should sit on that for 24 hours while the dust settles. Don't worry about sitting on that. Plan your second holding message 24 hours later. But as soon as your second holding message goes out, the world will descend upon you. So buy yourself a little breathing time to figure things out and get your feet on the ground. That's time zero. Classic. All right, here are the three issues. And again, I'm happy to riff on them. But start lining up your questions. I'm good for it. As hard as they come, I'm up for it. I've got the three issues as containment, emergency plan, and holding message. We've kind of touched upon two already. Containment is an IT team competency, right? So, and a governance piece, let me say too. So your IT team needs to understand how to do a triage assessment, so they understand when they figuratively pull the plug. Question for you as CAO is, are they confident in the triage analysis, and are they confident that they could pull the plug when required? Hope so. Maybe not. I will tell you, time is of the essence. We have had incidents, more than one, where containment was delayed. There was a little bit of hedging. Let's take down this computer and not the whole network. Let's reset this account and not the whole network. And literally after that decision was made, we later discovered when forensics came in that data was going out the door, literally. Okay. So time is of the essence, and that's the governance issue. There's a real question, and this is what we drill in tabletops, is who has the authority to contain? If it's you in the room, I'm not saying it's wrong, but you've got to have a pretty solid escalation protocol and contact protocol to make that safe, in my view. So a lot of institutions will push that authority down to the top person in IT who needs to be trusted with that decision. Again, no right and wrong answers, but you can see the issue is that time is of the essence. CAOs will also say, as soon as you're doing a triage assessment, I want the top person in IT to know, and I want to know. Okay. And if you can't find me, that's when you need them to have the authority to contain. Really kind of important issue. Any questions about that? How many of you in the room, I guess, here's my question for you then, is how many of you in the room have formally delegated that authority so your top IT staff member knows that they have that serious accountability? We've got some. That's good. So this is the kind of thing that you drill in an exercise so you get alignment around, and then it goes in your written incident response plan. And I'll tell you, you'll never actually pull your written incident response plan out in the middle of a cyber incident. But the fact that you talked about it and you put that authority in the plan will be what gets you through. That's how readiness works. That's issue number one. Emergency plan. You've all got one. And that dictates your business continuity plan. It's actually more important than your cyber incident response plan, I will tell you. And I think I'm assuming that you've invested well in that process and that it's running well. That's good, and that's going to help you in a cyber incident, because this is what you need to know. Because when services go down, you will not be able to turn to IT and say, IT, can we have this stuff back tomorrow? And even if you ask IT, when will we have it back? It's a perfectly fair answer for IT to say, I don't know. I don't really know, because this just happened like a half an hour ago, boss. And I don't know anything. So like just give me a sec. Totally fair and totally realistic. I'll tell you, it typically takes about a week, right? And you can actually kind of break down the recovery process and set recovery point objectives where you actually have a good sense of it. Rarely ever are they set. So most of the time we're freewheeling it, and most of the time the services that are really critical come back in about a week or so. So how are you going to run the municipality without your core IT services for an entire week? That's what your emergency response plan is taking care of. Whether you declare emergency or not, that will link to business continuity plans at a departmental level, ideally. And those BCPs will carry a lot of the weight as you get through a major attack. Okay, so keep up the investment on that. And remember, IT is not going to make miracles. They'll do their best. They're not going to make miracles. Holding information. Yeah, you know nothing at time zero, like literally nothing other than you've had a cyber incident. And again, give yourself 24 hours to kind of just get your feet on the ground and hold on that technical holding message. There's a real issue that you need to think through about reporting beyond the CAO and the mayor, and whether you report to anyone on council and how you engage council. Might depend on your council, but ideally you are keeping a secret from the public for 24 hours. So consider exactly when to tell council about this. It may be right before 24 hours rather than at hour 2, depending on your council. And a simple heads up to council is really what they need, and then you manage their expectations, which is that, you know what, like we will brief you fully when we're ready, but that may take 10 days. I call it the dark period. And it's very, very typical to go through that dark period. And then once you're through the dark period, you finally have enough information to plan, and then you can go to council with a plan. If you go to council without a plan and just a lot of questions, it's kind of a recipe for causing council to spin out of control. So that's why we try not to do that. We just like really calm them down about process and hold them off. That's time zero. Questions? Anyone who had an incident experience anything radically different that they want to share with others? We'll get you talking eventually. Oh, we got one. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Ah, excellent. 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 That I hope you all heard that from Huntsville. The main point was that the public was very understanding and viewed the situation properly. That's the key to the communication response, right? Is to make clear to people that you are a victim of crime and not a perpetrator of crime. It's one of the reasons, and I think we get to this on the next slide, that we always recommend reporting to the police like that. So the police, we love the police in the municipal sector. They're not going to help us. We have to be prepared to help ourselves, really. They may once in a while have some intelligence, so you can ask them for that as well, but they're not a lot of help. You're giving them intelligence, really, is why one reason to reach out to them. And the other one is that it's part of the narrative, right? We've told the police because we're a victim of crime, and victim of crimes tell the police. So you lay that narrative down, and if your community is great, and if you don't have other problems in your community that cause mistrust, you're very you're gonna get through. The other thing that we'll talk about as well is that the community tends to be less impacted by data theft. Employees tend to be more impacted from data theft. So of all your stakeholders on your stakeholder map, you got to be a little more touch focused on the unions, I think, in a municipality. It's one of the things that make you unique is that you're unionized heavily. And again, depending on the health of your relationship with your union, you may have an easy go about that or a hard go about that too. So good. Thank you for that comment. Thanks for sharing and keep sharing, people. Let's move on. All right. So you contact BLG or your other incident response council. This seems really weird to IT, by the way. If you have a protocol that requires calling a lawyer before you call for technical help, it's very bizarre. But the reality, which you may understand now, is that legal counsel, cyber incident response council have taken a really unique role in responding to ransomware now because of the insurers. So if you have cyber insurance, if you're lucky to, and we're not all that lucky, your cyber insurance will have a panel of lawyers who is, pretty experienced in cyber incident response. And this is how they mitigate the risk. They make sure that you have the guidance of someone who's experienced, like our team or another legal firm's team. And that's kind of why you call the lawyers first, is because they're your like main coach or advisor on all aspects of the process. We're not giving a lot of legal advice in these engagements, although we do have to, obviously. It's a lot of practical advice with kind of process knowledgeable backing. And then we retain other vendors to help out too. There's usually an incident response technical vendor that comes on board. They do let me save it for the next slide. And I think here we talk about a threat advisory vendor too, and I'll introduce that as well. We do not do containment. Sometimes people call me for containment advice, or they call me when I haven't contained yet, and it makes me really nervous. And I do my best to ask IT probing technical questions and lead them to draw their own conclusions. And I say something like, I'm just not the doctor that you're looking for. But so the point again, which I'll reinforce, is that your IT team needs to be capable and confident in having that containment capacity, then call the lawyer, right? And then the lawyer will get the others together. And we kind of pride ourselves on our responsiveness, but you can usually have this call here. It's just a scoping call within an hour, right? And so you're not burning a lot of time, which is really important. One thing a cyber coach will do if they're on your insurance panel is report to your insurer for you. It's a bit of a conflict issue. When we're retained, the municipality is our client. We have a duty of confidentiality, a fiduciary duty to you first. We're also quite obviously beholden to the insurance company that has basically referred us to you. That's not a secret from our client, but our duties are to you, but we'll report to the insurer factually. And I usually set a rule at the outset that says, listen, we're going to report to the insurer. It's their expectation. It makes them comfortable with what's going on. I'm going to keep it factual and simple and nothing that would surprise you. And if anything sensitive that comes up, or if I need your direction, I'll make sure I get your consent on a specific message. And usually that works perfectly fine. Here are your experts. So breach coach, that's what we are. We are just lawyers who do this a lot. And we handle all aspects, at least your coach should handle all aspects of the incident, from communications, legal. We retain the other experts, so all of the communications are privileged. We give them direction, so we can control their scope. Most of the vendors that we see on the insurance panel are very trustworthy, but you could have someone that's not typically working in this space that comes in and does you could do 10 varieties of forensic investigations at different scope and scale, right? So we make sure they're right-sized, because it's not in anyone's interest to do a giant investigation if a lean investigation will work. We kind of control all that stuff, and we just make sure you're comfortable about going through a very foreign process. That's the role of a breach coach. When you get to IPC reporting, which is a reality nowadays, there's statutory amendments coming in that will mandate that. We will advocate with the IPC. We know the IPC very well. Some files are really cordial. Some files are more adversarial. Depends on your analyst. We are always respectful, but we are your forceful advocates as well. That's our role. We hire a technical vendor and a threat advisory vendor. So the technical vendor does two things, not just one thing. They do forensics, but they're not just a forensic investigator. They do forensics, and they advise your IT team on the restoration process, so they're safe and they can be confident that they're restoring services without risk. Those are together, because when you separate them, you get into a conflict, right? Because the faster you restore, you have the potential for restoring over evidence. So you have to coordinate those two roles, which is why it's typically assigned to one vendor. And that vendor will kind of make sure that the evidence is collected before they've before it gets paved over. Not a hard thing to do, and it doesn't create a ton of delay, right? The only organizations we get who have come to us with their systems paved over before they come to us are SMEs. And they come to us and they say, we've got a problem because we've got a threat actor that's haranguing us. Oh, when did this happen? 2 weeks ago. Okay, that's great. What'd you do about the evidence? Oh, we restored in like an hour. And we're like, okay, we're going to manage this one, commando style, and we go from there. So that's the technical vendor, very important. If you have insurance, they've lined up very trustworthy ones. We also, as council, know who's good or who's not. We're not beholden to anybody, but and everybody moves all over the market, as you might imagine. But we know who's good at any given time, and we can guide you toward who's available and who's good. And then the threat advisory vendors are really specialized vendors. Some of the forensics firms won't do that work of talking to the bad guy and negotiating because it's too sketchy. So we have specialized firms that do that negotiation work, and they have a lot of intelligence about your adversary, which is important. It's really good to call them up and say, we've got an attack by this adversary. What's their behavior? How are they going to behave? What can we expect? And you'll get that from a good threat advisory vendor. They'll talk to the bad guys, and then if you choose to pay, they'll sometimes make the payment for you. Other times we have to bring in a special payment service provider who has a Bitcoin wallet and all that stuff. That's the threat advisory vendor. I will say at this point too, actually, that we'll always recommend at BLG that you reach out to the bad guy. We always will, not because we want you to pay or not pay, but because they're your adversary, and you need to control and have your adversary in sight. And given they're in business, you can control them for a 2 to 3 week period pretty easily. And you really want to do that. If you don't reach out to them, they're going to harangue your counselors. They're going to be on the internet, like you're basically out of control. I have had a debate with a public sector institution about the propriety of even talking to a threat actor, which was really bizarre, but I really think it's an imperative to reach out. They also have evidence, which we'll talk about next. That's kind of scenario 2. Questions? Anything to share? I am open to questions. Also typical. I think I've got this on day. I lost track of dates. I apologize. I think this is probably, this looks to me like day 2, right? Because day 1, you're underground. You typically announce the cyber incident on day 2. Not a secret you can keep, right? And it is a fact. One of the things that your legal counsel will do is they'll absorb all of the evidence. We absorb and track evidence for you, and then we will tell you when something's fact. So you're able to communicate fact rather than we don't know, we're speculating. So we're kind of the keeper of facts, and it's kind of fun. And that's what we do. We look at evidence and we say, okay, this is safe enough to be fact. It's very safe to say, as a matter of fact, you're responding to a cyber incident on day 2. That's an easy one. And you put out this holding message that you're going to hold on for about 10 days. Major services are down, but you're limping along. Typically, you've got your BCPs going. Your unions, if they're of the aggravated kind, are demanding information about data theft, which is manageable. And this is what your threat advisory expert does. They basically, on that little text file, you have a link to the dark web, and they just go to that link, which is unique to you. They'll have to prove that they are authorized to speak on behalf of you. Sometimes that involves sharing a single file that credentializes them, basically. And then what they'll do is they'll switch rooms so nobody else gets into the room, and then you'll be having a confidential chat with the threat actor. And they'll usually provide a file tree. Okay, so 300,000 files on the file tree, and here they ask for 2 million for deletion and a decryptor. Very classic scenario, day 2. Issues are all about investigation. Okay, so once you've got your expert team, which is day 0 stuff, you move to investigation because, again, you have to go from knowing nothing to knowing enough to make a plan, because everybody wants your plan. And there are 3 prongs to the investigation. The fastest, best prong is to talk to the bad guys. Really. So that's why we always recommend that you reach out to the bad guys. It's a key thing. We typically will work with a sub-team in your organization who's involved in instructing the negotiator. It may be you and like 1 or 2 others. Like, we really bear down on that team, and it will be BLG or your lawyer plus the small team and the negotiator on an email thread. Okay. The email thread, it's so sensitive that we often take the email thread out of band and just do it that way. And we implement a double approval protocol. So every message that goes to the threat actor has to be approved by the lead at the municipality and me. And that's how we keep it safe. I don't really get fussed about text. I let the experts do their thing. That's why we hire them. They propose text and we say, okay. And I'll probe and ask questions on the record if need be. That's kind of the protocol. You may not have out-of-band emails, right? And some of you probably have spent some time and invested in out-of-band email emergency systems. That's good. I'll tell you what often happens is people just spin up Gmail accounts, right? Like, I know they're serving ads off your publicly available Gmail account, but you got to do what you got to do. They're actually quite secure because no one can find you. You're like they're totally private. No one's, so that's the norm. It is a records governance and an MFIPA issue. The practice for the right-thinking municipality is, okay, after we no longer need those accounts, everybody export everything from that account, close it down, and put the emails back on the municipal system, because we all know they're municipal records, right? So you're doing what you can here, right? In a perfect world, we all have these systems. The problem with the systems that you could buy, by the way, is if they're not email, they're not really easy to use, right? Like, we have these clients who spend money on these great secure systems for communicating, and they're not email. So you might imagine that your breach coach has like 4 of these files going at once, and I'm watching my email. Like, I'm really good at it, and I can respond to emergencies on email. But then if I've got this other system that's pinging me over here on my phone, you're at the bottom of the list, right? So email works because it's universal, and it's evil, but it's got its pluses too. So that's why it's actually an issue to think through in prepping. Second part of the investigation, obviously, before I get to forensics, the second part of the investigation is just like IT network sleuthing. Like, we will say on day 2, okay, how are your backups? And IT networking will always say, our backup system is really secure. And I'm like, you didn't answer the question. How are your backups? Oh, they're probably good. Okay, I think you should check your backups. And then you check and check and check. And we have had incidents where like, you think you have backups and then you realize that you don't have backups, which changes everything, right? Like, you have to know. So we go through a process of just validating the state of the network, basically. That's part of the investigation and requires some diligence. The IT networking team is working very hard through this whole process. It is your option to hire outside help just to be boots on the ground and to help them. It does help sometimes. It's very expensive help to have that, but we can kind of connect you with that as well. And then the third part of the investigation is the one that you think of first, forensics. It's the most It's essential from a due diligence perspective. I think you've got to have forensics. It's very slow and often doesn't tell you a whole lot. Most of the time, the IT team will say, "Oh, we know everything that these fancy forensics people figured out." You're going to the forensics people because they're not your IT team and they're independent, right? They're very good and they do find things. They do find everything that they can find, right? They will have evidence sources that your IT team does not know about, and have tools that your IT team doesn't know about, and they'll wrap it all up in a nice report. But it's slow. It's like you're not going to get a forensic report for 3 weeks, and nobody's waiting for 3 weeks to take action. And it's a draft report at 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks for a final. And it won't tell you what was stolen unless you have some crazy atypical networking tools on your network. They can, at best, find some corroborating evidence for the data theft. But I'll tell you and I'll show you by the time you get to that, the threat actors have proven what's been stolen anyway. That's the kind of nugget on investigation. And again, once you're on day 2, that's your focus. Let's figure this thing out. We have no information. Let's get it. Questions? Comments? Stories? Okay. Okay. I'm going to encourage you every time. I am interested in those of you who have had an attack, if you've seen anything like this. My sense is that municipalities are actually getting pretty easy with government hands-on during incidents. I don't know if it's your ministry or because you're governed the way you're governed, but the ministry is not as jumpy as it is with municipalities than it is with hospitals. Very jumpy about a hospital. If you're a hospital, this is really what you'll see. Crazy calls, like you're doing something confidential and they want to check in and you have to check in because they're funding you. And it's confidential, but there's like 30 people on the call. Like, these government calls, right? Makes us a little nervous as incident response council. And it's the trick in getting through it is just being factual, not getting drawn into speculation, and telling them, the plain facts, which typically aren't much, and minimizing the downtime because you've got like a crisis on your hands and don't have time for these giant calls on a daily cadence. We actually have to negotiate with the government sometimes, like, no, we don't want to meet tomorrow, but I, as council, will give you this in 3 days. Can we do that? And we get, we get traction. Any feedback on that? Have you seen kind of the province step in on your incidents? Anyone care to share on that point? Want to put anyone on the spot? Thank you again. Yeah. Awesome. So Huntsville had a pretty smooth sailing with the province, which is, again, I think it's just typical of the municipal sector right now. Let's hope it stays that way. Not the case in the other sector. Colleges and universities, just so you know, colleges get it bad because they're closer to government than universities who are, autonomous by their nature. So it all depends. And I always say it's a little bit awkward because the government has not been very good at making the reason for its outreach clear, right? So it will say that it's here to help you as an advisor, but it's not a privileged advisor and it doesn't really have a lot of help to offer. It's overseeing you in a way because you may have funding accountabilities to it. So that's in there too. And then the other role government may have, and I actually am a supporter of this role, is helping others. So threat information sharing is a cyber response issue. Whenever you are attacked by an outside threat actor, you have evidence relating to the threat actor that may be of use to other municipalities, right? So the question is in your own time of need, what are you doing to get that evidence out to others so they can protect themselves? And to use a very simple example, even an IP address, right, that correlates on your network with the threat actor can be shared with another municipality or all the other municipalities who can block that IP address, right, or scan for that IP address so they know whether they're being targeted by the same actor. So underdeveloped process, let me say. I've never seen threat information sharing done well. Although everybody recognizes, including the cybersecurity standards people, that threat information sharing is important. And government could be this is another way it kind of gets itself into incidents. It says, well, we're here to share information with others. And I'm not sure they're the best entity for doing that. It may be better, for example, for municipalities to create their own exchange. Colleges, for example, have created their own exchange, and I think it's just they're more in control of it, right? Yep. All right, this is kind of next on the in the scenario. They prove theft to you, and may not be apparent how they do that. So they give you a list of 500,000 files. We always ask the negotiator to say, is that complete? And they will say yes. And a lot of people say, well, what's that worth? Is that evidence? It is evidence that they say it's complete. You can debate the quality of that evidence, but they really have no reason to lie to you, right? If they had a complete list, why wouldn't they tell you it's complete? It's in their interest. So it is evidence. So we ask that. And then we say, okay, give us these 5 files from that list of 400,000 files. And you pick the files randomly across your network. And I think we probably overthink it, but we do our best because you only have 5 files and it's your best evidence of theft, right? So you try to pick files that are not all in one folder, right? You don't pick files that are published on the internet, right? Because not much proof of anything if they didn't come from, if you can't be sure they came from your network. And we try to pick files that we can identify as ours because remember, you don't have access to your files right now, so you have to be able to identify them. And you try not to pick files that have like super sensitive personal information in it because they're going to be on your evidentiary record. And you don't want the super sensitive stuff to be on your evidentiary record if you ever have to use it as evidence. And you don't want to also flag the super sensitive stuff to the threat actors because they're sitting on a big blob and they may not know about the super sensitive files. So don't pick the most sensitive thing in your 500,000 files and highlight it to the threat actors. If they return those files, you could do the math and the probabilities of that, right? But we will then, as BLG, give you a legal opinion. Remember, we do that with facts and evidence. We say, oh, the threat actors have now proven theft of that list on a balance of probabilities. Of course, of course, that's not a certainty, but on a balance of probabilities, if this went to court, or the IPC or anywhere, it would be facts based on that test. And we will also tell you the forensics people are working really hard. We're about a week in here, I think. But they will not, I will tell you, disprove that fact. You can't prove a negative. So they are really unlikely to disprove that fact. So actually, at this point, you're out of the dark period, right? Remember, you're waiting for enough to make a plan. This is where you're at. It's about a week in a typical timeline. The other thing that you have to do to be prepared to proceed is on this slide. It's the words, your analysis of the file list. Really important. So as soon as you get that file list, which is usually about day 3, so we're backing up like 3 days from February 5th, we will tell you, listen, the best you can, we need you to really analyze that file list to determine to the very best of your ability what was taken. And we know it's just a file list and we know it's 500,000 files. but we've got to do our very best, because the better a picture of that file list that we can have 3 days from now, the more confident you will be in making a good plan. And nowadays, it will enable you to notify very early of the privacy breach. Used to be that we wouldn't. I'll get back to that later, but the file analysis is really important. I will tell you that the threat actors target HR data. My theory is that they know it's there, right? Like every employer in Canada has the same HR data on their systems if they have it there, right? A SIN number is a SIN number. A T4 filing is a T4 filing, right? And it really shouldn't be stored on file shares, but it often is. I bet you have a municipal file share with a lot of kind of things that are exported from your HRIS and are sitting in your file share. Probably shouldn't be there. That's what the threat actors target. And if you're like a lot of, and this is almost 90% likely in any incident, you will notify employees. You'll actually find in that analysis something like this. All employees who are employed by the municipality currently and 5 years going back are affected. And uniformly, the data exposure for that group includes SIN numbers, compensation information, date of birth, blah, 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 blah. It's just the nature of stuff that's sitting on your file shares. You figure that out through file analysis. We encourage clients to use AI now to kind of parse the file lists and look for files that are suspicious and give you input. And we give them about 2 to 3, we try to buy about 2 to 3 days of time to analyze that list. And finding that uniform employee exposure is a very mixed blessing. On the positive side, uniform exposure is, once you can see it, you know, it's the old thing, like you'd rather have certainty than uncertainty, even if the certainty is bad. And that's the normal outcome of that file analysis. Almost always clients will come back and say, we've got this uniform employee exposure. And we say, well, welcome to the club. That's bad news. We've got a real easy way to deal with it. And now that you can see it, you can manage it. So don't worry about that. What about like community members? Oh, we have no idea what's in there, right? Like it's all mixed. Like okay, we this municipal service, we see a bunch of data. This municipal service, we see a bunch of data. I'm like, okay, that's good. We can work with that. But we may need to do some time-consuming and expensive data analysis to pick up the rest. Typically what you see. In any event, we've got a pretty good view at this point, right? We also know that one critical system wasn't backed up, and that's going to cost us $100,000 in data recovery costs, which can be costed. You're going to send your server that's encrypted out to a data recovery expert, and they're gonna crack away at that computer. And they'll actually, I'm surprised how good those services are, but they're expensive. So that's what the $100,000 is for. And that's where you are. You've got pretty good knowledge to deal with the incident at this point. I think I've talked to all these already. Employee data exposure, most significant. Analyzing the list, so important. The advent of AI is just a brilliant thing for that. I can tell you, it's really like when that light bulb went on, we were like, this is great. You know, you create a prompt that says, you know, look for files that T4 is this and this and this, and help us mine it. It just is really helpful. And you see, and we're going to talk about the value of data suppression. How's that for euphemism in a bit? But which is what the threat actors are trying to sell you. You can't cost that. Well, you can, but you can't, which I'll explain. But missing data can be costed, right? So as soon as you know you have a significant backup problem, we will be working for you in gathering kind of costings, right? That we'll be working, we'll grab a data recovery vendor and we'll try to get a rough costing of the 100,000, because you've got a ransom demand to deal with and weigh out, right? You're out of the dark period though. You have knowledge, which is where we wanted to get you through a lot of hard work in a week. Questions, comments? Yeah. You're saving them up for the end, maybe? right, the decision. Here we go. This is kind of where you're at, right? And you've held them off for a week. They know you're doing all this stuff, by the way. You've got knowledge, and then you go, okay, what the heck are we going to do with these jokers? Right? And the threat is we will publish your data on our leak site on the dark web if you don't pay us in 3 days. It's $1 million Canadian, let's say. You got to decide whether you pay or not pay. I have the executive team against paying here, by the way. It is one of the issues that you really need to work through in advance is whose decision is it? I hope it's not council's decision. I think it's an operational decision. I don't think it's a council decision. Although I would never pay a ransom without reporting to council on the decision, right? So we'll talk about going to council. But I don't think it's. I think it's probably best to be an executive team decision because you're apprised of the knowledge. You're not a politician, so you're not going to be influenced by political factors directly, at least. And I'm in there with you too. I will tell you that in about 20% of the cases, we do go to boards of directors, including elected boards, school boards. I'm thinking. To make the decision. But if we go to the board to make the decision or council to make this decision, we have a very strong recommendation and I will deliver the recommendation for management typically. And I can deliver it in the voice of God like it's the best thing ever. And it tends to go through without even any debate, amazingly, right? So there's multiple ways to do it, but you need to kind of figure this out in advance. One other thing I'll riff on here. Psychological harm reduction is what you buy when you buy data suppression. So think about it. The information's gone. Like you're not going to undo the breach, right? It's out the door. So all of your risk is there. You don't know if they delete it, right? But if it's a brand name threat actor, they're most likely not going to publish it if you pay. And they're most likely going to publish it if you pay, right? And I usually give a percentage, like 95. If you pay, 95% likely that they won't publish, and 95% likely that there won't be any overt signs of misuse, maybe out there somewhere. If you don't pay, 95% likely they're going to publish it as threatened because that's in their interest, right? Sometimes they're so lazy they forget that's the 5%, but don't count on it. What you get from paying then is you still have to notify, is you get a little more mild scenario. So you're able to say to your community, and we will change the communications if it's not going to leak to say, and you can become an insurer of the risk because the risk of actual harm to anybody is very, very low. You can say things like, we do not believe there's any risk here. You are going to be okay. And you can kind of bear the risk in that regard in your communications and take the temperature way down. And that makes a difference to your really psychologically sensitive employees and community members. You can take the temperature down. What the heck is that worth? Who the heck knows, right? But I'll tell you, some leaders it's usually the leaders that will make that decision. They'll say, I have an ability to help my people and I will do it. And others recognize that and they say, I'm not going to pay criminals and I have the ability to help my people get through this and I'll do it. And I can't tell you what's wrong or right. And I'll tell all of you there's no right or wrong decision. Doesn't matter, which is why I can defend it either way. We do talk out of both sides of our mouths as lawyers, but on this one, we are unassailable. I could go to counsel on either way and say, this is good for, we've got a plan. Everything fits together. People will be fine if you don't pay, or the opposite. Which makes the payment decision surprisingly not critical. Like I have some clients who are agonizing about this. Like they want, models and this and that. And I'm like, don't worry about it. You got to be thinking about many, many other things than the payment decision. Okay. Yes, you need to understand which way you're going to make a plan. But yeah, You know, like there's no right answer. You'll figure it out. I don't know, little reductionist, but I really think that's the case. I wouldn't sweat it too much if I were you. You'll figure it out. If you pay, you'll have a plan that features milder communications and less time pressure. That's nice and take the pressure off you. If you don't pay, and we plan this anyway with you, your mitigation is to get everything out before the threat actors leak anything. So you're in control. That's what good process gets you, is control. And we will set the whole plan with you. We'll figure out with our advisors when they're likely to leak. It takes time. We'll set a tolerance or a date, and then we'll build in 3 days back from that. We'll call it your D-Day, and we'll say, listen, even while we're negotiating, because we have no guarantees, we have to be ready to announce the data breach to the public, notify the IPC. We'll have credit monitoring codes in hand for employees, and we're going to get them out within a day after announcement. Everything will be ready, and then let them publish. Those jerks, you know, like, gosh. And, you know, having that plan in place and all those things in place gives you the power. It's a wonderful thing. So you can be in control. And that's why I don't think payment's a necessity. And then if you can get a deal because you're prepared to do that, maybe it's nuisance, right? And we have, sometimes the threat actors just cave because they've invested in your incident. And you can say, you know what, we're ready to do this. Let's just lowball them and see what we can do. We'll give them 150K. And sometimes you'll get a deal for like 200, 250. And I call that lowball, right? Versus if you're not prepared to do the D-Day plan, and you're really jumpy, that's when we get clients that are paying, you know, $1.5 million, 2 million. And it kind of pains me a little bit because I've lived through the D-Day plan with leakage many, many times, and it ain't the end of the world. And I'll tell you all this too, and kind of helping you decide all this stuff. And then we'll go to council and sell it, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'm watching our time here. I think I've got 5 minutes. Scott? 2 minutes? I have 2 minutes. We're going to go fast. This is kind of like just all the good news too. You've got through all of the stuff. It's really as simple then as going to council and delivering the plan. D-Day looks something like this. You've committed to ongoing analysis, which takes some time. We'll get to these slides. Credit monitoring is really good, by the way. We always give it to employees. We wouldn't give it to people if they don't warrant it. Like, you're really looking for birth dates and SIN numbers. If you have birth dates and SIN numbers, give credit monitoring. If you don't, you're just you know, like, you're just aggravating people, because if they don't need it and you give it to them, it signals that it's worse than you think it is or say it is. The IPC process takes about 8 months to work through. If you do it well, they'll just close out their file with some non-binding recommendations. They've got order making power now too, which is a little more concern, but very rare too. They've got a lot of these, and unless you're really big, you'll fly below their radar and won't get targeted. Municipalities have been fairly lucky, knock on wood, to date, in being targeted and being the subject of kind of high-profile reports. I'm sorry I didn't leave more time for questions. I'm not sure whether we can take a couple questions now, Scott. You're nodding your head. Question. Yeah, they will give you the files back as part of a ransom payment. Have they ever not kept their deal? That's the 5% risk, which is typical. And we'll tailor that based on our threat advisors' advice. It has happened, but and they'll retarget too, like is another one. Like, we had one where they came back 6 months later and said, you guys didn't take care of your security the way we advised you to, and we've got your data again, but it was the same data they had before. And you can't pay twice, period. That was a small bit threat actor. And you generally want the big and branded ones because they're more reliable. Sounds super strange, but you can assess the risk. If they're small and unknown, I'm not going to tell you 95%. I'm going to tell you you're bearing a higher risk, and you can make a risk-informed decision. Good question. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dan. A very practical and insightful presentation on a topic that we all dread. One of the things that keeps you up at night, for sure. We have donated to Feed Ontario on your behalf as a thank you for your efforts.